Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. So as you can tell, they're not saying here at these events that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, the Messiah, the only way to heaven, because that would contradict Islam and Judaism. So it's uniting. Everybody's giving up the truth here. They're all just coming together to get along, to give up the truth, which is that salvation is found through Jesus Christ alone. Back to the article, it says, "We recognize the importance and value of the document of human fraternity for world peace and living together between the Holy See and Al-Azhar al-Sharif." And then they mention two different documents that were resolved and signed and replaced by the UN General Assembly, as well as the Makkah Declaration adopted in Mecca in 2019. And these call for peace, dialogue, mutual understanding, and mutual respect among believers. So it's really the uniting of all these religions under the fact that we need to coexist together. And yes, of course we need to coexist together. But the problem here is that they're starting to aim it towards we serve the same God, we worship the same God. You know, these Abrahamic religions are just different expressions of God to different people, and that's an absolute lie. The Jewish people are stuck in the old covenant, not accepting the new covenant. Islam is clearly, the Quran was written 600 years after the Bible, and they're clearly ripped off stories. Muhammad ripped off and manipulated to create his own religion in the same region from the same stories. I mean, Muhammad even demanded that the original manuscripts for the Quran be destroyed. Why would he demand that? Because to cover it up, obviously. So the one truth is found within the biblical text alone, within the Old and the New Covenant mixed together, the New Covenant, salvation through Jesus Christ alone. So really, it was this document of human fraternity. It was signed by the Pope and this Grand Imam and adopted at the 7th Congress of Leaders of the World and Traditional Religions in Kazakhstan. It's the uniting of the world under a one-world religion that the Antichrist will be the head of eventually. A glimpse of the 7th Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religion. Here's from Vatican News, and I was reading through this article and noticed something interesting that Congress, the 7th Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religion, came to life in 2003 in the wake of the tragic September 11th attacks of the United States and following Pope John Paul II's second spirit of a CC meeting in 2002. So here's just another thing that came out of the September 11th attacks. Pretty interesting to note that. Worth noting about this interfaith meeting is that it took place within a pyramid. Kind of strange that that's their building of choice. Also, Pope Francis said that his goal for this meeting was peace and unity. Of course, very similar to what we know in 1 Thessalonians 5:3, peace and security is what they'll be saying. And then sudden destruction comes on them, like labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. And that's the whole point, really, of this whole meeting, really. And this whole uniting of these religions together, not that we shouldn't get along and not that we should be out killing each other or something, but the fact that we're there trying to unite everybody under peace and security. That's exactly what the Bible says they'll be doing, because it's dropping the truth that Jesus Christ is a way to salvation, which is the true love and peace that people need to come to realize, and just accepting everybody's false doctrines and false teachings for peace and safety. And that will cause sudden destruction. Pope Francis also said at this meeting that the best way to stop religious extremism is not through following the teachings of Jesus Christ, but actually through political democracy. So just enforcing the fact that what the Antichrist will have, which will be the one world government, one world religion. And again, Pope Francis does not mention the truth that salvation is found through Jesus Christ alone, but in fact says this, and this is from Vatican News on the article called Pope and Kazakhstan Religions, Key to Building World Peace and Understanding, in reference to this meeting that took place. It says in his speech to the Congress, the Pope began by addressing everyone as brothers and sisters, in the name of the fraternity that unites us as children of the same heaven. He noted that before the mystery of the infinite that transcends and attracts us, The religions remind us that we are creatures, not omnipotent, journeying towards the same heavenly goal. I mean, out of his own mouth. I mean, the fact that people who are Catholics don't see that this guy's pushing for one world religion is insane. I mean, it's absolutely clear as day that this is what he's pushing for. We're all going to the same heavenly goal that Muslims who actually have written on the dome of the rock building in Jerusalem actually says God has no son. And so they want to unite Catholicism with people who say God has no son, because it's clearly written clear as day in the Bible that you have to acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God in order to find salvation through him. Everything in the New Testament has to be believed 100% truth for you to find your salvation. That's the full truth is found within the Bible alone and within the New Covenant and the new teachings. And if you're giving up some of that to find peace and unity with other religions just to get along because you don't like disagreeing with people, you're in for big trouble. I mean, Revelation even says the cowardly are cast into hell. So don't be cowardly when it comes to the things of Jesus Christ and the truth of the Bible. Now again, quickly worth noting, I'd have no problem if these people all came together and said, hey, we shouldn't kill each other. And we shouldn't be warring with each other because that's not good. That makes sense. But when they're starting to say these things about, we're all brothers and sisters pushing towards the same heavenly goal, and even though this was between Islam and Catholicism, it also noted from a Vatican source that Judaism was there as well as Buddhists. So we have this uniting of the one world religion that will come to fulfill the 2 Thessalonians 2, for all people will worship the beast. Also worth noting is the Abraham Accords before Donald Trump's election. He declared the #1 goal for his presidency would be to achieve peace between Israel and her Arab neighbors. After 3 years of determining diplomacy, President Trump surprised the world by announcing a peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. A few days later, the country of Bahrain announced they would to establish peace with Israel on September 15, 2020. Representatives from Israel, the United States, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain met in Washington, D.C. on the White House lawn. There, they signed the Abraham Accords. Again, this unity pushing towards this unity, which is interesting. And because of Daniel 9:27, it's prophesied in the Bible that a peace agreement will be signed between Israelis and Palestinians just 7 years before the Battle of Armageddon and the physical return of Jesus to the earth. The prophecy is found in Daniel 9:27, and it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate even until the consummation, and the determined shall be poured upon the desolate." This prophecy states that the Antichrist will confirm the Abrahamic covenant with many for 7 years. Remember the covenant God made with Abraham, declared Abraham's seed would dwell in the land of Israel. The Abraham Accords is signed by Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates acknowledge Israel has a right to exist in the land given to them by the Abrahamic covenant. So the question has to be asked, was the signing of the Abrahamic Accords and the confirmation of the covenant that marks the beginning of the final 7 years? May be interesting, worth noting and pointing out, but we will see, of course, as time goes on. Also worth noting that Jared Kushner had a big deal in getting that Abrahamic Accord signed. Really what all this is setting the stage for the final Bible prophecies to be fulfilled. We don't know the timeline. We don't know these things. There's many interesting things that look like this could go on, like Pope Francis being the last pope, if the St. Malachi prophecy is true and real, but people are saying he may resign and then another pope resign before him. So if that happens, maybe those two are illegitimate popes, and there's still 2 more to fill the 112. There's so many different things that could take place. Just like now, when we look back at Bible prophecy in the Old Testament, it all makes sense now. But at the time, it was like people thought this was going to happen and it didn't happen. People thought something else would happen and it didn't. The same with Jesus coming and then expecting the Messiah to be this war hero to free them, to free the Jewish people from the Romans, And it wasn't that at all. But Jesus tells us it's important to watch and to look for the signs of the times. Just like the fig tree, and many things are happening that really look like this is beginning to take place. And these prophecies are coming to their fulfillment. So it's important to watch, but when these things don't, if they don't pan out how we expect, or if they're like beginning stages or seeds or whatever, then it's important to watch and to just see how these things pan out in the end. But clearly all of these things moving towards this direction are moving towards the direction of the final days and the Antichrist coming in these final prophecies being fulfilled. Also, I know I've seen many people on my TikTok page saying that they're worried and they're scared and they're fearful. None of the pointing out of prophecy from me is ever meant to be fearful or to scare people. Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. And people who don't believe in Jesus Christ, which is not the message that's being said at these Abrahamic unions, they're going to give in and receive the mark in their hand or their head or worship the image in the beast, and those people will not be saved. So it's important to be aware and awake to this fact: salvation is found in Jesus Christ alone. And we are not to give up that absolute truth under any circumstance. That's the only way to salvation. Thanks for watching, and God bless. Flash floods have hit parts of Saudi Arabia as heavy rainfall has been recorded across the kingdom since last week. Saudi Arabia is known for its hostile climate of little rainfall. Being a conglomerate of mostly desert and partly arid lands, the land has been far from green. However, a shocking phenomenon is currently happening in the desert land. Surprisingly, the desert is rapidly turning into fertile farmlands, and this is a shocking phenomenon to even scientists. What is happening in this desert? Keep watching this video to find out. Before we go into details of the causes of the increasingly miraculous farmlands in Saudi Arabia, it might do you some good to know how dry this country initially was. We had long known and associated Saudi Arabia with scorching heat, dryness, and deserts. This was right. In fact, Saudi Arabia is the home of the world's largest desert, Ruab al-Khali, with an expanse of 650,000 square kilometers. This, in fact, was the size of a whole country. Again, do you know that this country, the 14th largest country in the world, with a total landscape of 2.14 square kilometers, does not have a single permanent river? If you think you've heard it all, relax, because we're just getting started. We said earlier that Saudi Arabia is one country with very little rainfall. Now, let's be specific. Historically, the country has never seen an annual rainfall of more than 150 millimeters. This needs to be a better ratio. Because of this, a large part of Saudi Arabia has been majorly dry, leaving just a small part of the southwest region for planting. Even up until the late 1960s, the country was recorded to still have as low as 400 square kilometers of fertile land. This is 0.5% of the entire country. At this point, you may wonder how the citizens had survived in terms of agricultural products. Well, the answer is plausible. Before the country started experiencing a breakthrough in the increase of farmlands, the citizens survived mainly by planting small fields with local crops. In contrast, all other necessary food items that could not be planted were imported. At that time, narrow strips of coastal lines were the only planting area, and only a few crops, like dates and vegetables, were grown. With a country that big, this limitation was no good news. Now let's talk about the miraculous oil dam, a crucial element in the shocking increasing farmlands in Saudi Arabia. Though the country lacked water, it definitely needed more. In fact, Saudi Arabia turns out to be a country with the world's largest oil reserve. Well, as they say, God deposits something in everyone that makes them special. This proved true for Saudi Arabia, when somewhere in March 1934, a large amount of crude oil was discovered in a dam oil field. The dam went so deep that it reached a depth of 1,440 meters. Thus, the country soon became a holder of about 17% of the world's identified petroleum reserves. This reserve was estimated to be around 75 million barrels of oil. So with the wealth in oil resources, the Saudi Arabian government thought it could do more, and thus, the process of the miracle of rapidly increasing farmlands began. Fast forwarding to the present, Saudi Arabia can now be added to the modern seven wonders of the world. This is because what used to be a center of importation of food items is now a center of exportation of wheat, date, dairy products, eggs, fish, poultry, birds, fruits, vegetables, and even flowers. But how did the fortune of a country that was nearly all desert change from a food importer to a food exporter? What are the Saudi Arabians doing that we don't know? Though it appears to be so, the fact that the desert lands of Saudi Arabia are rapidly turning to fertile farmlands is no magic at all. While some contributing factors were pure luck, a larger percentage of the causes of this shocking phenomenon resulted from a combination of deliberate plans and actions carried out by the Saudi Arabian government. But what exactly did they do? Well, hang on as I take you through the strategic processes alongside the lucky occurrences that turned a desert into fertile land. First, they invested massively in technology. This is because technological equipment was needed to provide everything that would transform desert land into fertile farmlands. So the agricultural state of Saudi Arabia has been transformed through massive investment in programs that promote modern farming technology and rural infrastructural elements. Being a country immensely enriched with oil, the government of Saudi Arabia didn't sit back and relax. Instead, they channeled the nation's resources into developing fertile grounds for the people. Early in their investment venture, the government had focused intensively on establishing facilities for producing dairy, meats, and poultry food. By 1985, the nation had started swimming in self-sufficiency with products like meat, milk, and eggs. Not only were they self-sufficient, but they became massive exporters of agricultural products as well. Also, during this period, there was a massive output of milk production, which amounted to about 1,800 gallons per cow annually. Fish farms were also on the rise. These farms were established in locations that were both on land and at sea. The establishment of these fish farms led to the production of seafood. Amongst this seafood, the shrimps were highly enriching for the country. Consequently, Saudi Arabia became a massive shrimp exporter to countries like Japan and the USA. Sales of the black tiger breed of shrimps were particularly successful. Also, because of the efforts put in by the governments of Saudi Arabia, the nation soon moved quickly from being an importer of wheat to an exporter of the same. Wheat silos built in 1978 soon became wheat-sufficient in 1984. Major grain-producing districts in Tepakal and Kazim now have an output of about 3.6 tons of wheat per acre. There were also productions of other grains like barley and millet. After a while, grain production became so massive that it had to be curtailed to conserve water resources. As farming and transportation methods improved, there was an increase in the production of essential farm produce like fruits and vegetables. Consequently, products like watermelon, grape, citrus fruits, onions, squash, and tomatoes were famous in the area and were major items of exportation. Again, what the increase in farming activities meant for the people of Saudi Arabia was an increase in the availability of local cuisines. These cousins included dates. Consequently, about 500,000 tons of dates were produced annually in different varieties. Soon, many factories within the country became actively involved in the production of tens of thousands of tons of dates to help alleviate poverty and food shortages worldwide. The nation became so active in foreign aid that it became the second largest contributor to food aid in the UN. It definitely should feel good to be in Saudi Arabia now. Another thing that aided the rapid improvement of the architectural state of the country was the government's willingness to support local farmers. One of the ways through which they did this was to provide interest-free loans and technical support services to farmers. Again, the farmers had access to low-cost water, fuel, and power alongside duty-free importation of raw materials and machinery. That aided their farming. Also, the government was wise and generous enough to offer mouth-watering benefits to investors. so foreign venture partners were exempted from paying taxes for up to 10 years. The investment regulations that were set up in April 2000 went further to offer extra incentives. None of this would have been possible if not for the efforts of the country's Ministry of Agriculture, which made favorable policies to help local farmers. Also, Saab, the Saudi Arabian Agricultural Bank, continued to provide interest-free loans and subsidies to aid farmers in achieving maximum farming results. Grain silos and flour mill organizations were also established in 1972, and they were responsible for buying and storing wheat, building flour mills, and producing animal feed. The construction of modernized highways connected agricultural regions to major markets. The government also undertook capital-intensive projects that supported farmers with high capital needs, thus aiding the diversification of the economy. The government also supported research programs that were aided at producing new food crops, increasing crop yield, and finding new ways to make crops pest-resistant. Local farmers and scientists also collaborated in agricultural research facilities within different universities in the country. Literally, all hands were on deck. Water, being an essential part of agriculture, was also needed. Since Saudi Arabia lacked water, it needed some luck and brains to achieve agricultural success. Here's how the challenge of water got solved. First, they used aquifers. Saudi Arabia happens to not be so dry after all. Deep tube wells were drilled in the most promising urban and agricultural locations. This was an ancient water source that Saudi Arabia now fully relied on. The aquifers are now one of the major sources of water for the Saudi Arabians in their pursuit of green land. Again, the country succeeded in maximizing the seawater available to them. Being rich in the coastal lines that stretch from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, the government soon engaged in desalination activities. As a result, seawater was soon converted to potable water, usable in homes and industries. Consequently, the Saline Water Conversion Corporation, SWCC, operated about 27 desalination plants within the country, producing more than 3 million cubic meters of potable water daily. Finally, the country evolved to what became known as electric power recycled water to tackle water shortage. This process involved recycling of the water that was used for domestic purposes. For this reason, water recycling factories were built in the capital city and other large metropolitan industrial centers to help recycle water. Now, the irrigation of farm fields is done mostly with recycled water. All these processes soon made water available on the land and aided agriculture. We've come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Now you know why the deserts of Saudi Arabia are becoming green fields. But what do you think about this phenomenon? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you liked this video, ensure to hit the like button, share, and subscribe for more.